Welcome to Lunch and Learn. Thank you for taking this time out your day. Today we are going into how to write a service agreement, how to put together an effective, useful service agreement. And we have the genius that is Jodi Green who put that together for us. If you want to introduce yourself you're welcome to unmute yourself. You can also introduce yourself in the chat. I'm Shani Katima. I'm the NJDLC Project Coordinator and a Community Doula.
I'll say hi. I'm Jodi Green. I'm the co-director of the New Jersey Doula Learning Collaborative and a doula in New Jersey. I see you in the chat, Brianna. Welcome to the call. Good to have you here. Great to see familiar names. I see some doulas I recognize on this call. Hi, Pamela Nichols. I'm so glad to see you here.
I'll also introduce myself. Hello, everyone. I apologize for being off camera. My name is Joni James. I am the Managed Care Project Coordinator here at Health Connect One. The New Jersey Doula Learning Collaborative is also one of the projects that I am leading on and supporting. So it's great to see some familiar names. And those of you who are new to me, at least, it is a pleasure to have you on this call.
And I can go next. I'm Danya. I'm so sorry I'm off camera, and I work with the NJDLC as the administrative assistant. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I see you in the chat, Alexis. Welcome.
Congratulations, Alexis. She's newly certified.
Are you the Lexi I know who just finished training? I'm glad you're on the call.
Yes, Lexi.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. Great to have you today.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angeline. I'm also a community-based doula that did my training with Health Connect One through the Partnership for Maternal Child Health.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And I see Tamara Etheridge from CDOSJ on the call. Welcome, Tamara. What a great group. Oh, this is a lovely lunch and learn. This is like being at lunch with friends. How great. So one of the things that we're excited to talk about, part of the role of the DLC is supporting doulas in building their business, in building their practice, and in gaining more confidence in your skill set as a doula. One of the things that we emphasize in doula training is having a solid service agreement. Let me hear from you. Why do we have a service agreement? Why have one at all? What do you think?
To establish clear communication between the provider and the client.
Yes, absolutely, Angeline, to help establish clear communication between the provider and the client sometimes, but to elaborate on that, to make sure that the client knows what communication responsibilities we are taking on, and that we've communicated that it's our job to understand what's really important to the client. It's a communication tool. You said it perfectly. It is a communication tool that we use from the very beginning to create level setting expectations with client and doula to create a harmonious relationship. This is relationship-based work that we are practicing, and a good service agreement helps us create a solid relationship-based communication tool from the very beginning. It covers all of the details of when to call the doula from day one until the time your baby is a year old. It talks about what to expect in labor, what a doula will do, what a doula won't do. Let's think about some of the really important things to include. We want to include information about our on-call availability, how to contact us, how to pay us, what to do if they can't reach us, and under what circumstances will our service agreement no longer be holding? to either one of us. So, out of many trainings and many conversations, the DLC recognized a need for guidance with service agreement creation among doulas, and we have created a template. I am so excited to share that we have created the beginning of a doula toolkit on our website, and we're going to share that link in the chat so that everyone can access that. And we're going to do a walkthrough of it together. So I'm going to share my screen and pull up our template here. When you are writing your service agreement, these are the considerations to keep in mind, the things that you want to make sure that you mention and that you give the definition of your practice in this agreement. Now, you will see that there are some places where we simply ask the question, how long are your appointments? Because for every doula, that might be different. And for every client, that may be different. Someone in private practice might have an initial visit that's 2.5 hours long, whereas someone who is providing services for someone enrolled in New Jersey Family Care may be sticking to their 8-visit template, and each of those visits is an hour. This is up to you to define in your service agreement so that your clients know what to expect. First and foremost, we call this a service agreement and not a contract. Doulas do not have contracts. Contracts are not legally binding unless they've been attorney reviewed. So unless you have an attorney retained to read through every service agreement that you have, it is not a contract. A service agreement, however, from a legal perspective, is binding to both parties because you are acknowledging in writing that this is a mutual agreement that you are both upholding. You're both doing this consensually, you agree to the ground rules, and it's legally binding to both of you. So label it your services agreement. You want to include your name, your business name, and your contact information, your phone, your email, any other contact that you prefer for your clients to have. You want to have an address and your preferred payment information. Put it right there in your service agreement so that you don't have to text or email back and forth about how to pay you. Make it easy to pay you. If you have an electronic service agreement that people can sign electronically, you can hyperlink your payment information in there as well to make that just one step swifter. Be sure to cover how often you'll meet and at what point in pregnancy. Some doulas do not do initial intake visits until after someone is 12 weeks gestation. Others say 16. Some say 5 minutes after you pee on the stick. What's real for you? What do you prefer to do? In my private practice, I see people at 12 weeks or more. We're out of the woods on the time when people are more vulnerable to experience miscarriage during that time. And it's also after that first trimester that we really begin to dive more deeply into what their wishes might be for their birth and what their self-care looks like in their second and third trimesters. How long will each meeting be? Is it an hour? Is it an hour and a half? Make sure your clients know. And how are meetings to be scheduled? In my practice, I have a service agreement that states that appointments are scheduled a minimum of 2 weeks in advance and that I schedule by phone out loud because that's the fastest way to reach me. This is not because there's any legal recommendation to do it that way, but because I have met me and I know that my attention span has challenges. And if I email someone 3 different dates in the morning, by the time I go back and check my email again in the evening, I will have given one of those spots away to someone that I spoke to out loud that afternoon. And now there's an extra step of juggling back and forth when it's really faster to just text me, hey, Jodi, got a minute? I'm going to call you out loud. I'm going to put you on speaker. I'm going to look at my calendar while we're talking, and we're going to get that appointment plugged in. I am full-time, so I'm going to schedule a couple of weeks out, and I want my clients to be prepared for that, especially if they want evening appointments, because my evenings go fast. I teach 2 evenings a week, so my availability to meet with clients is limited in the evening, and those evening appointments book up quick. So I want them to know, call me out loud, and let's do it 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Some people have their calendar set up through their website. That's great information to include here. Others prefer to be texted. Put in here what works for you so that your clients know from the very beginning. How often are your clients to remain in communication during their pregnancy or postpartum? Do you offer consults outside of your regular appointments? So one example that some doulas and some organizations use is the guideline, call your doula or check in with your doula at least after every care provider appointment. I tell my clients, I want you to text me every time you go to the doctor. Every time. If it's an emergency, I want to know when you're on your way. If it's an appointment, I want to know you saw Susan for 5 minutes and nothing interesting happened. Good. I really want to know that you had a boring appointment with the nurse practitioner. But I also want to know, what other appointments did they ask you to make? Do they have you seeing maternal fetal medicine for any reason? What testing did they order for you? And what information do you have about that? What questions do you have before the time you go in? And how can we navigate together the conversation that you might want to have with your provider that addresses the questions that you have? So that's outlined in the service agreement. How often to contact the doula. And if you offer consults outside of your regular appointments, what are your protocols for that? Do you attend doctor visits with people? Do you do extended visits for an additional fee? Make sure that that is outlined here. How can you be contacted in emergencies? And what should someone do if they have an emergency and they can't contact you? Who can they contact? In my practice, I give emergency contact information the day their service agreement is signed. I do not give emergency contact information before that service agreement is signed, because I do not want people asking my backup if they can interview them in addition to interviewing me before they make the decision to hire us. My backup is available in emergencies, and I value the time of my backup. If after someone has gone into service agreement with me, they wish to contact my backup, I encourage everyone to call the backup, and my backup is a fan of that as well, so that they've connected voice. But I'm not sharing that contact information until after the service agreement is signed. However, that information is in there. How often are you going to do follow-ups postpartum? Make sure that that is included in there. One specific example that I've seen in practice is, I will call you at least once within 2 days of your baby being born. I will visit you face-to-face at least once within 6 weeks of your baby being born. And any appointments above and beyond that need to be scheduled individually. Where will you join people in labor? And when will you join people in labor? One of the guidelines that I've seen work most effectively is when a service agreement states, I will join you at your birthplace of choice when active labor is established. And the reason I recommend a broad stroke like that is because it gives you the freedom and the flexibility to join people earlier in labor if you choose to, and if it seems to be the right decision for this individual circumstance. But it does not bind you to joining every person in labor at what might be too soon in the process, nor does it bind you to joining anyone in any particular circumstance that you feel would not yet be appropriate or would not be appropriate at all for you to be there. I can give an example. I once knew a client who said that she wanted her doula service agreement changed to state that the doula would not recommend that she go to the hospital until she had met with them at home. Right? So doula is going to put in writing, I won't tell you to go to the hospital until I've met you at home. The danger in an agreement like this is that it doesn't account for emergencies. What if? What if someone's water broke at home They had a high fever and signs of a raging infection. The doula has the ethical obligation at that point to say, this is a circumstance that needs help. Really, this is a time to call your doctor, call your midwife, go in, get checked. Let's see what's going on. But if that doula has put into writing that she will not tell someone to go to the hospital unless she's been there at their home, that not only places the doula in harm's way, it places the client in harm's way as well. So use the common denominator that will be true for all of your clients, and then you can add flexibility from there. So I will join you in your birthplace of choice at the time that active labor is established. Active labor is 6 centimeters or more. If you have someone who's undergoing an induction, they might want you there sooner than that, depending on what their labor progress looks like. And that is something that can be determined on a case-by-case basis. But at minimum, it establishes that if they have not called you in yet, by the time it looks and feels like active labor, it's time to call you. And in your service agreement, include in their birthplace of choice. I am well aware that doulas will sometimes meet people at home for labor support. I'm not ever going to say don't do that, but I will say I do not recommend putting in your service agreement that you will do that, because then it binds you to that action when that action may not be what is safest under the circumstances. At what point will backup be called if needed? Many doulas have in their service agreement a time limit at which backup will be called. In my practice's service agreement, it says, after 12 hours, a plan to call the backup may be established. I tell every client, this does not mean I'm going to look at my watch when I walk in. Oh, it's 12:21. That means you've got until 12:21 tonight, and then we're calling someone else. No. It means that 12 hours in, we're going to have a conversation. I'm probably still going to be fine 12 hours in, but I want us to have a conversation about what the present moment looks like, how long we may have ahead of us, and at what point we might decide as a team that it's good to call someone else in. If I had a good night's sleep last night and I had a good breakfast before I got called in and I get called in at noon, by midnight that night, I'm probably still going to be fine. But by sunrise the next morning, I'm going to be tired. And I do not, as a doula, want to reach the point of exhaustion in myself that I am no longer beneficial to the person that I'm serving. So rather than creating an awkward situation, we're going to talk about it ahead of time. 12 hours in. All right, y'all, it's midnight. Everybody needs some rest. Let's have a conversation about at what point we're going to reach out to Ayana and see when she can come in. Outline that ahead of time. It prevents it from being a surprise. And if it's not a surprise, everybody's generally okay with the plan. It is important that your service agreement clarifies your scope of practice. The language that is on this service agreement was contributed to by an attorney team that did review this service agreement in particular. It is really important that we include language that specifies that we do not make recommendations in conflict with care providers regarding the medical care of parent or baby. That does not mean that I can't, they don't have to do what they're being told. It means that I will not make a recommendation that is in conflict with what that provider is recommending. If the client wants something different than what the doctor is recommending, I'm not going to hesitate to tell them that they can say so. But I will not diagnose, prescribe, or treat, because that is outside the confines of what my services will entail. So clinical tasks are not on board. We're not going to take blood pressure or do fetal heart checks. Those are going to be services provided by the medical caregivers. Doulas will not make decisions regarding care or speak on a client's behalf to others regarding matters where medical decisions are being made. So I, as a doula, may not say, her birth plan says she doesn't want that. However, I, as a doula, will not hesitate to say, I remember at your last home visit, you said that was something you did not want. Do you still feel that way, or have you changed your mind? Put the power of the decision making in the hands of the client, not in my mouth. Post-birth, how long do we stay? Typically, a doula will stay for about an hour after the baby's born. We're there for that golden hour. I want to see that that first latch happens. Well, if that's possible, if the baby's up for that in that amount of time, I'm going to call the next day and ask how they're doing. And postpartum visits, at least one in the first 6 weeks and another in the first 12 weeks. How are yours scheduled? And is it clear in your service agreement whose responsibility it is to schedule that postpartum visit? I have found it beneficial in my service agreement to specify that it is up to the client to schedule the postpartum visits. Because some people, 6 weeks out from having a baby, are excited to get to sit down with their doula. It's the first chance a lot of people have had to sit down and talk about their birth with somebody who was in the room, who wasn't in labor. And that's wonderful. But some people are returning to work at 2 weeks postpartum, at 4 weeks postpartum. And they're doing what they can to hold it together. And if it is not practical or desirable for them to make one more appointment with me, I don't want to put myself in the position of having to refund for services that I promised and did not deliver. So the service agreement says it is up to the client to schedule these visits. Now, as doula, of course, I'm going to be following up with them. I'm going to be texting them, hey, how are things? How's the baby today? How'd you sleep last night? But if they drop off and don't contact or schedule those visits, I am not in the position of owing a refund. That's important to set yourself up in an effective way that way. What do you do about insurance reimbursement? Do you provide documentation? Do you file for the reimbursement yourself? Are you doing your own billing? Are you using a billing service? What pieces do they need to know? And how long should clients allow for this documentation upon request? I only do insurance documents on Friday mornings. I hate them. So I put them all into one chunk of time that I can just sit down and that week's documents in one fell swoop. That might not work for you, but my service agreement says allow me at least a week to get those documents to you because I only do them once a week. Alternate care. There are any days that you are going to be unavailable. How and when will you let your clients know? Your service agreement might say something like, if there are any dates that I am aware of in advance that I am unavailable, I will let you know as soon as I know, and I will make arrangements for appropriate backup and put you in contact before that time arrives. In the event of an emergency, short-term backup will be arranged as determined by the moment. How can your backup be contacted? I already shared. My backup's contact information is shared on day one. As soon as that service agreement is signed, if you ever have an emergency, I say, in the event that I am kidnapped by aliens, here is a number that you can call where my backup will answer the phone. Unless we've both been kidnapped by aliens in the same place at the same time, she will make sure that you are in excellent hands in the event that I have an emergency that would keep you from being able to reach me. I would hope no one ever has such an emergency, but emergencies are important to be prepared for. Oh, I wish I had the quicksand picture. I'll show that later. How is your backup chosen? That's another important piece to include because some clients will want to know if they can choose a backup for you. They want to know if they can choose the doula they liked second best and have her be your backup if you're not available. But the backup agreement is between the doula and the backup doula. It is important that your backup is someone that you trust, someone whose style of care you are confident in, who's going to stand in your shoes in the event that you cannot be there. This is the person you are trusting to protect your practice, in addition to providing excellent services for your client when you can't be there due to an emergency. be sure that you outline the responsibilities of the client. Most doulas say something like, it is important that you inform your caregiver that a doula will be present at your birth. In some hospitals, they are now adding the doula's name to the client's file. When the doula arrives at the hospital, security can let the doula in more quickly because the doula's name is already right there. Some care providers want to have the doula's name in the file before they have conversations with everyone so that they know that this client is given permission for you to have access to their information that would be protected by HIPAA. Sometimes clients will ask, well, my doctor doesn't really like doulas. Can I say that you're my friend? And yes, you can show up and say that you're a friend, but a few minutes in, the knowledge you have acquired as a doula is going to give you an awareness that will make it evident to the hospital staff that you're not just a friend, that you're somebody who knows something about what's going on in that room. And it is better for everyone to practice full disclosure from the beginning that you will have a doula at your birth. It's also to the client's advantage to disclose that they have a doula, because in New Jersey, doulas are not counted as additional support people. We are considered essential staff as part of the care team and do not count as individual support people. So it's good for the docs to know you have a doula. It's important that the doula's name is on anything that they want the doula's name on. Clients are responsible for keeping the doula informed of the details of pregnancy and of conversations with a provider. Doulas, this is a place where we can make our own lives a little easier. Our schedules do not need to track when everyone's next doctor's appointment is if we ask the client to take the responsibility of checking in with us after the appointment. I want to hear from you after every doctor's visit. You can shoot me a text and tell me that your appointment went fine. You can send me an email, or you can ask me when I have time to talk out loud, because I'm going to set aside half an hour for us to have that conversation. How is the client to notify you when labor is here? And do you have a sentence in there about what happens if they don't notify you? One service agreement I like a lot says it is the responsibility of the client to notify me out loud in labor. No text, no email. You only have to get that 4 a.m. text, hey, my water broke, one time before you are really clear on saying, please call me out loud and let me know. And sometimes the client will say, well, I don't want to wake you up. My service agreement is giving you permission to wake me up, because I promise you at 4 a.m., if I can be, I'm going to be asleep. I am not going to get your text until I wake up at 6:30. Right? So let's communicate that early, and it avoids any problem ever happening. Let me know that you're in labor right away. Call me out loud to let me know. And when will you join them in labor? And how long should they allow for you to arrive after the come now call? My service agreement says allow an hour and a half from the time you say come now to the time I am walking in the door. Because if I am picking my daughter up from school, I'm going to need to get her home and get myself changed and then get out the door and get to the hospital. If I am in the middle of teaching a childbirth class, I'm going to wrap up that class and then I'm going to be on my way. I may not be where I can drop everything and leave immediately. So if they're expecting to allow an hour and a half, they tend to be better at calling sooner rather than later and not waiting until the last minute. Some doulas, I'm backing up to our backup, some doulas use 12-hour language as a disclaimer to say after 12 hours of service, another backup will be called, and that it's the responsibility of the client to pay that doula. Where I've seen that become problematic is in clients not calling because they don't want to encounter an additional charge. We've also seen it happen recently, and one of the doulas on the call has seen this happen recently, of a client not calling because she became aware that she was going to have a copay for her doula, because doulas are considered specialists through some insurances. So what do you do if they don't call you when they're in labor? Does your agreement say that you charge a retainer that is non-refundable, whether they call you or not? Does your agreement say that failure to call you in labor does not equal a failure for you to provide services and no refund will be given? Let's include that in the next line. What are your fees? What do you charge? Do you charge a retainer? Do you have a payment plan? And by when is the final payment due? So that might say something like full fee for services is $2,000 with a $500 retainer due on the day of signing and 3 payments of $500 due at 16, 28, and 36 weeks. Failure to be paid in full prior to on-call time, let's say 37 weeks, might result in a failure of the doula to be available to attend. Your service agreement can say, if you don't pay me, I don't come. That's okay to do. If you have any barter arrangements, make sure that you include room to outline what that will look like and be very specific. I'm not anti-barter arrangement. I think anyone who's taken training with me knows that. But it is important that you assess the value of the barter and make sure that you are getting an equitable exchange, that it's an equitable exchange for everyone, and that you document the value of that, because your barter income does have to be counted on your taxes as a doula. The cash equivalent of that would need to be counted as income on your business taxes. Include your refund policy. Do you have one? I think if a doula does not show up when they are called, they owe their client a refund, and not just a refund of half, but a refund of everything that client has paid them. The argument exists, well, they did the prenatal visits and they did the check-ins. Yes, and that was done under the understanding that the doula would be showing up at their birth. And if the doula does not show up when they are called and they do not have adequate backup support, and that is on the doula owes a full refund. Make sure that that is included in your service agreement, but also under what circumstances will a refund not be given? What if there's 17 inches of ice falling out of the sky the minute that somebody's water breaks and New Jersey is in a state of emergency and the roads are closed? That is a circumstance beyond the doula's control. And a service agreement can say, in the event of emergency events, emergency weather events, an especially rapid labor under 2 hours, a premature labor, an unexpected cesarean session, under these circumstances, no refunds will be offered, as these are circumstances beyond the doula's control. You are paid for the commitment of your time. If a circumstance occurs that is beyond the scope of control of the doula is still paid. Outline that in your service agreement, and it's never an argument you will have to have. Include your signature, include the client's signature, and their due date. Some doulas also include a partner's signature. I don't ask for a partner's signature, but I do ask for the partner's name. I would like the partner's name if they are birthing with benefit of partnership. I would like the partner's name to be on this service agreement so that I remember what their partner's name is. I save them in my phone as name, and then on the calendar they are in as name, due date, partner's name, practice name, hospital. So that whole blurb is just right in the calendar from the day they turn 37 weeks until the day they turn 42 weeks, so that I know who I'm on call for and when. And there you have it. All of these components together will create a solid service agreement that gives you a great foundation to begin with your clients from beginning to end of the time your services are provided. I want us to consider how we use these service agreements as well. It is important to read this service agreement out loud with every client every time you have an interview. So in an initial appointment, it might look like we sit down, we have a conversation, half an hour, getting to know you. I love to ask the Disney birth question. Okay, magic wand, Every wish granted, Disney birth. What would your birth look like? And then really listen to the answer, because they are about to give you so much more information about themselves, right? What are they afraid of? What are they looking forward to? What are they confident in? What are they concerned about? Where are places that they haven't mentioned anything that you might want to draw that out a little bit? Or where are places that they're already very clear in what boundaries they've expressed? This is where someone will tell you, well, I already know that I want an epidural as soon as I'm there. So what can we do to make that happen? Or someone might say, I don't even want you to breathe the word epidural to me unless they're taking me into the OR. Let's start that conversation now. And then after we've gotten to chat for a little bit, you might say something like, we have already talked about a lot of the things that are going to be covered by this service agreement, but here's what I want to do now. I'm going to share this with you. And you can. If you're meeting with them virtually, you can put it right in the chat and share it with them then. If you are meeting face to face, you can send it to them electronically by email, or you can have paper copies with you. When I carry paper copies, which I haven't for a while, I keep 2 copies so that I can put one in front of them and one in front of me. I'm going to sign both of them and leave them 2 signed copies so that they can sign 1 copy and drop it in the mail to me if they're doing it hard copy. Most of the time we do them electronically. I'm going to email it right over and say, pull this up so that we can look at it together. And then we are going to pull up this service agreement together, and we're going to talk about it. I'm pretty sure I have that pulled up on this device. Take a look. Switch it to this browser window so I can share it a little better. Here we are. So at this point in the conversation, we pull up the service agreement, we share it, and then I am going to read through this while we are all here together, because I want to make sure that we check in on any questions that you have. And read it out loud, exactly like I just went through the template with you. Initial meeting. As your doula, I'm going to meet with you at least once. And the reason it says at least once is sometimes I get a phone call, right? This happened last year in June. I got a phone call from someone who said, I've just learned about doulas. I'm hoping you can come to my birth. And I said, well, probably. When is your baby due? 4 days ago. I'm in the hospital being induced right now. My nurse gave me your phone number. She really meant, I just learned about doulas. Can you come to my birth? So fortunately, my service agreement says I'm going to meet with you at least once for at least an hour to discuss your pregnancy and your services and to gather an understanding. I said, give me an hour. I'll come sit down with you. Let's chat for an hour. I'm going to leave. And when active labor comes, if you feel like I'm going to be of help to you, you call me, I'll come back. And that's exactly what we did. Appointments. If time of hire permits, we're going to get together at least 3 times, once for our initial meeting and again at 28 and 36 weeks. I want those visits scheduled at 28 and 36 weeks because I really want them to happen before 38 weeks, and there's only one of me. So there's always a chance that I'm going to have to reschedule at least one of those visits to accommodate somebody being in labor. We're going to plan these visits out 2 weeks in advance. Appointment dates and times might change if somebody else is in labor. I like people to call out loud and schedule appointments with me, because if you text or email, it just takes longer and maybe more back and forth. I am here to support throughout your pregnancy. I want to talk with you for up to half an hour after every appointment. You can also email, text, or call me normal business hours, 9 to 6. If it's an emergency, you can call me out loud anytime, day or night. I will be available to be on call from the time you're 37 weeks until the time your baby is born. Most people are going to have their babies between 37 and 42 weeks, but if it happens that your baby comes early, I'm still going to be there. 37 weeks is the guideline that I use so that I don't overbook my on-call time for my clients. If you go into labor early, I am still either going to be there or I'm going to provide backup that time. This does not mean that I will not come if your baby comes early. Once active labor has been established, I will join you in the birthplace of support, birthplace of choice as a support person. I will facilitate communication with your care providers. I will provide reassurance, perspective, and non-medical suggestions for comfort and for labor progress. I will stay until an hour after your birth. If labor support is required for more than 12 hours, a backup doula might be called. And this is where we have the conversation about what that will look like. That doesn't mean I'm going to leave. It means we're going to have a conversation about at what point to call the backup in. Once labor is established, yep, we're there. I'm not going to do clinical tasks, no blood pressure, no heart checks. That's just for your medical caregivers. I'm not going to speak on your behalf. I do not make recommendations in conflict with your provider regarding more baby. Post-birth, I'm going to call at least 2 days after your birth. I am available for phone support for lactation support, newborn care, self-care. I will do an optional in-home visit within 6 weeks of your baby being born, as long as you call me to schedule that visit. If you need paperwork for your insurance or MSA reimbursement, I will provide you with documentation. Please allow me a week to get that done. If there's any dates I'm not available, I'm going to let you know right away as soon as possible. I will arrange for a backup, and I will make sure that you have spoken with my backup before I go, because I don't want your first call to them to be at 3 o'clock in the morning. In the event that I have 2 clients laboring simultaneously, backup services are going to be arranged immediately, and it's my job to pay the backup. That is included in my fee. I ask you to let your caregiver know that you're going to have a doula at your birth. Keep me informed of the details of your pregnancy, and if you suspect you're in labor, call me out loud right away. Call me out loud right away, because if you text me and tell me you're in labor, I might not see it, and you might not get a hold of me as quickly as you want to. It's going to be your decision as to when you want me to join you in labor, but allow at least an hour and a half from the time you call and say, come now, to the time that I arrive. My package fee for this birth is $1,300. Half is a retainer at the time of hire, and the other half is due in full prior to 37 weeks. If you don't pay me, then that eliminates my availability to attend your birth. If we have any modifications to this fee, there's room to write it at the bottom of the page. I will refund fees in the event that I fail to be available to provide service or provide backup support. But if my absence is because nobody called me, or because of emergency events that would affect my availability that are beyond the scope of my control, then services will not be refunded. And then there's room for a signature. So it's plain to see how this communication tool can be used. That was in 10 minutes time. I outlined everything that a client would need to know about working with a doula. This helps create confidence in our communication with our clients. It creates clarity in their expectations of us and ours of them, and works toward establishing a beautiful business relationship with gorgeous, healthy boundaries from day one. So we will share the link to the template in the chat for you to use to write your own service agreement. I hope that that is helpful to you to have. What questions do you have? Or observations, or ahas, or oh wows? Is there anything that we haven't included that you think you might want to include on your own service agreement? Toshira, what's on your mind?
Oh, I think that you covered a whole lot. I think it was very clear, concise, and it was really amazing. One thing I ran into issues with is when parents have children, small children, and sometimes they don't have child care, or they don't have like somebody to help them with their baby if they have to go to the hospital. And so what I did on my service agreement, I included that as a support that the backup can offer, but then I connect them to the backup, but they have to work out the arrangement of how they will pay that backup, because the backup is willing to just be just that, the backup. And if you got a mom with 2 toddlers and she's in labor, sometimes that's a big barrier when
Yeah.
you arrive at the house and now they're in active labor. Oh, my cousin was on her way to get the kids. Oh, my partner's still at work. He can't get off. Those are real life scenarios that happen. And that's the only thing that I've ever ran into. But I loved your presentation. It was amazing. Thanks for sharing. I learned a lot.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. And yes, covering something about sibling doulas can certainly be included, that if someone needs a sibling doula, you're happy to put them in touch, but that's not the responsibility that you will be taking on as their primary doula. I see Joni's hand and then Eduku.
Yes, Jodi, great presentation. I just wanted to get and make sure we answered some questions that were in the chat. Ayana did ask, and if you can clarify for us, Ayana, she wanted to talk about Medicaid. I'm not sure if you wanted to expand on that thought as well, Ayana.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Ayana.
Hi. So I asked about specifically about insurance and Medicaid or commercial because of the retainer, the fees for if they don't show up. That's where that question came from. One is it even allowed? Because when you're with Medicaid, you have an agreement and with them. So not just for me, but for everybody. So that's clear. Like there's things that you can do with your self-pay or direct pay clients in that service agreement that you are not necessarily able to do or allowed to do with your insurance client.
Right. So with insurance clients, your financial agreement piece may look a little different in that they have a separate agreement with that. That's the service agreement that we have with the MCO or with the insurance provider that determines what that fee is. So the blurb on my fee for this birth might be included on a private practice doula client, but on family care client would say payment schedule is according to New Jersey Family Care reimbursement rates as set by the MCO. And then you'd have the separate agreement that you have with that client as you enroll or as you are interacting with your billing with that. Does that make sense?
I think so. So
it's two separate pieces. One talks about what services you're going to be providing and what that looks like. And that financial piece is a little different with family care because we can't charge in
right.
addition to what family care pays. So a statement, if this is a New Jersey Family Care reimbursable birth, payment will be according to the individual MCO agreements and will not be paid by the client. That's a good sentence to add into the template, and I'm glad that you asked it.
It's a little bit different. And then I did ask the question, I'm waiting for the response about if that happens with your commercial clients, which it could be a little bit different, but I haven't got the response on that just yet as far as if you are able to have a fee for no show, no call, no show type of fee in your agreement to say if you outside of what we discussed, those emergencies, you do not call, what that can be and if that line can be added. But I'm waiting to hear that back, and it would be in the service agreement under your fees, if that's allowed. My other question was, and I'm not sure if anyone's doing this, if you are taking clients outside of an hour, we know best practice, you should be within an hour, being that there are currently only 4 of us right now that are fully contracted with the commercial. I am running into a nice amount of clients who are outside of that hour. And so in considering that, trying to see what that looks like. So that just want your thoughts on that and how I can cover myself. And I'm thinking more of even the travel, because that's now I'm going beyond our normal travel within the hour. And so there was a discussion about travel fees or, accommodations, because I don't want to cancel. You don't want to not take anybody when you know you're so limited. And if you decide you want to be quote unquote a traveling doula, there's traveling nurses and doctors, like what does that look like in a service agreement form like this?
Right. So that's a lot of questions all at once. I'll do the best I can to address them. You're right that with the private insurance, sometimes providers can charge copays. Providers can charge fees that are not covered by insurance. And in those cases, insurance just covers what insurance covers. And there are additional fees that may be incurred that are not covered by insurance. As long as you've outlined that clearly to your clients and they understand what parts they are and are not paying for, I believe private insurance allows that flexibility. Family care does not. We cannot charge anything in addition to what family care pays, because that's considered insurance fraud. With private insurance, that's a little bit different, because then it's piecemeal. There are pieces insurance that may cover and pieces there aren't. I have known doulas to include in their service agreement that births outside of their 1 hour service area will incur an additional charge of X amount, whatever it is. But I also know doulas who just change their fee based on where they're going. My fee is different if I'm going 6 minutes away from home than it is if I'm going an hour and a half away from home, because that hour and a half away from home, that's another 10 hours of my time just in doing their prenatal and postpartum visits without there ever being in labor, right? So fees are adjusted accordingly for that in private practice. Again, in family care, we cannot charge anything above and beyond what family care pays. But with private insurance or in private practice, you might be able to do that. I see that Iduku has a question, and I also see Lizzie in the chat with Medicaid. If the client doesn't call you to the birth, then what happens? Then you don't get paid. If they don't call, you do not get paid. So emphasize how important it is that they call. They have to call. They have to tell you out loud. Even if they don't want you to be in the room, you can go and sit in the waiting room. You can go, pop in, check in, and go wait, but you're there. Emphasize from day one how important it is that they call you when they're in labor. And Iduku, I see that you have a question.
Hi, Jodi. It's so nice to see you again. And your presentation was really helpful. I remember during our training you sent the agreement, and that's been my template for my own service agreements. But my question was the same, similar to Ayana's, about sort of when you're working with Medicaid clients and how the fee and payments work. And I know something that I've done. I'm hoping to get some insight on if what I'm doing is best practice, or maybe I should think about it in a different way, is that I have had Medicaid clients that no-show visits, or just the communication is really poor. And, at the end of the day, it's kind of wasting my time, because I've set out all this time for this particular client. And so something I put in my service agreement is that after 2 no-shows or after 2 cancellations, I have the right to cancel the contract, because, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I'm able to provide the best support that you are hiring me for, essentially. But if we're not having good communication, at the end of the day, it may not be a good fit. So that's why I have a little stipulation in my agreement for that. I also still put how much the care costs, even though they're not, they're paying through insurance, so that at least it's kind of listed this is how much it is, but your insurance is covering it. And I do have a stipulation that if for any reason your insurance lapse at all, or you're not eligible anymore, or something happens and I can't bill, you're still responsible for the fees, but we could work together to come up with an alternative payment arrangement. if you still want me as your doula. So just to cover myself and also be able to make sure that my time is still being protected. So I don't know if that is helpful at all to you, Ayana, in terms of what you're doing with your service agreement, or just like if I'm in the right mode of thinking in terms of that. But I think it's kind of, it's been really important for me to protect my time as well, just because, you know, I ran into that problem and I knew I had to kind of make sure I fixed something in my agreement. So, so yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, everyone. I feel like we could stay on for another hour and continue to talk about this. It's always such a good topic.
We probably
Anthony,
could.
Daniel, do either of you have the survey link available?
I am about to launch it.
Thank you.
So thank you all again for attending the Lunch and Learn. I'm going to launch a survey poll. If you could please fill it out before you exit, and then, you know, you can give a thumbs up to let me know that you're done and I can end the poll. So a question that I did see in the chat while you guys are doing that, is this template going to be available? Yes, you should be able to find it on our website. I believe the site map specifically would be, if you go to njdlc.org, you click resources, and you scroll down to for doulas and doulas to be, you should see the service agreement. It is the first component in our doula toolkit. There are a couple more to come.
And it
Next
is
month-
downloadable.
And it is downloadable.
Yes.
Next month's Lunch and Learn is on postpartum services, how and what to offer and how much to charge for it. There'll also be the component of the toolkit for that as well. That's the fourth Wednesday of every month.
Wonderful. I hope to see everyone there. We'll talk through our postpartum services agreement and what that looks like, and it's going to be a good conversation.
Office hours is right after this. If you need the link, type in the chat that you need the link. You also should be able to find it on our website if you scroll all the way to the bottom on the left-hand corner.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Thanks for being on the call. And we look forward to seeing you next time.